I forget. Okay. And okay, so I know what to do. I think I know what to do. Yes, I have to share the screen. Yes, share the screen. Click here. Okay, and then I'll Mies. Okay. Mies, and we start from the very beginning. So this is like, you know, if I'm allowed to say so, kind of like a bonus, because I always like to talk about two architects. And in this case, there is a connection, obviously, because Mies built a lot in Chicago, and so did Harry Weese. So it would be a chance to compare what an European, essentially, architect did in Chicago and what an American architect did in Chicago. But I will start first with what Mies built before he immigrated. A few pictures of him. Here he was drawing. Hopefully he was not drawing with a cigar, because he was always smoking a cigar, like other you know, famous architects. I know that in his apartment in Chicago, he had on his walls little artworks by Paul Klee, and Paul Klee was such a different artist in a way than the artistry advocated or promoted by Mies. This is his gravestone, kind of like his architecture. This is a monument for Rosa Luxemburg. Again, this was his work in Germany. And at that time, he was not afraid to even promote some kind of expressionist architecture and use brick. It was the tectonics were heavier, and it's an interesting period in the work of Mies van der Rohe. Some people might not expect him to have done such a work, but he did. And we'll see a few other things, villas that he built in Europe before he immigrated. This is a project for the Bismarck Monument in Germany. A little bit overwhelming, so to speak, but anyway, it was for Bismarck, for an overwhelming political figure himself. Good drawings, but I don't know, the ideology is a little bit heavy. Here is a sculpture of him. This is Mies, or is supposed to be Mies. And this is a chapel in Chicago. And I wanted to show it because from what I know is his only you know, so-called religious building, and it is on the campus of Illinois Institute of Technology. Drawings. He drew well. I like his drawings. They might be schematic, but I think they are very sensitive. And I think in his own way, and I know I could say something maybe a little bit provocative. I think he was you know, some kind of a mystic, actually, a mystic of the right angle. Although he, in a few works, and we'll see them, or not too many, but he used also, you know, other angles, not so adventurously as, for example, Zaha Hadid did, but nevertheless. But I read like a small manifesto that he wrote, which is very lyrical and even a little bit ineffable. So like his drawings, you know, these are very sensitive drawings. And so he appears to be a rationalist, but I think there was a touch of, if I can say so, maybe a little bit questionably, a touch of mysticism. And after all, you could even be a mystic of the right angle, in a way like Le Corbusier himself was in his Le Poème de l'Angle droit. Here is a collage with a painting by Paul Klee. Here is a collage, of course, with Guernica by Picasso, and I don't know who the sculptor was. He used collages sometimes. A very exquisite architect, no doubt. I will go kind of, you know, not in a hurry, but I will not insist too much because the main subject of today is to be Harry Weese because it is his birthday. This is a project done by Mies, which is expressionistic. The drawing is excellent, is very skillful. And here he uses other angles. You'll see the plan here on the right side. He didn't really develop on the, he didn't develop his work in this direction, but, you know, certain traces of what he was to become are to be seen even in the drawing on the left. He was a modernist even then, of course, because if you compare with the existing building, you realize that he was a revolutionary. Another skyscraper, modernistic, of course, he totally misjudged the height of the trees. No trees are tall 10, 12, 15 floors. So it's a, let's call it a poetical license. Sometimes architects do this sort of thing, you know. But here it's so obvious that I just couldn't ignore it. I mean, the trees are twice the size of the buildings with 5 floors and the roof. Anyway, this is, you see, again, he even used curves. This building was not realized, but it shows that he was open to, he was not dogmatic really, although from what I know, he kind of led the architecture school at IIT with a steel hand, so to speak, or steel arm. Early works, some works that would surprise you, and they surprised me. You wouldn't say this was Mies. It was Mies, but very young and, you know, not yet, you know, the revolutionary that he was to become. But maybe there was something in this work that maybe if it was explored further would not have been necessarily a loss, maybe. The tensions between invention and tradition are eternal, so to speak. Another house in Berlin, also, you know, it's hard to believe this was by Mies, but it was the Wolf house. Very, you know, stern in a way and intimidatingly symmetrical. Another house, large house. I wonder how he received these commissions because he was not trained as an architect. He was, but neither was Gropius. I mean, I don't understand how these people had the chance to build when they actually, today they wouldn't have the right to build because they didn't study, they didn't have a license, an architectural license. So I don't know. In those times, it was easier, I guess. This is though a good building, already a modernistic building. Of course, you wouldn't say it's a house, you would rather say it's a school, but it is a house, and he's on his way towards becoming that Mies van der Rohe that we know. What I don't know if you know this, but his name was not actually Mies van der Rohe. He changed his name. His father's name was Mies, and Rohe was his mother's name. So he changed his name. He still kept Mies at the beginning, almost like a first name, but he wanted to, I imagine he wanted to have his name sound like the name of a nobleman. So he needed that van, V-A-N, but in Germany was not allowed to do that. So he appropriated or used the Dutch form, van der Rohe. So that's why we have Mies van der Rohe. What is also maybe strange is that in English the word Mies means loser, and I don't know. It's kind of strange. The nobleman who kept the first part of his name referring to something self-derogatory in a way. Anyway, maybe an essay could be written or a PhD paper about his name, but I'm not going to write it. Anyway, it is a good building. It is a modern building, but it's I don't know if one would really call it a house. Another house, also, he's moving towards modernity with great speed and more convincingly. And I like the fact that he still uses in these houses brick. But you could very well say that these buildings are somehow undecided between being a domestic architecture and something else. Because when you look at this building, well, it could almost be an office or a little, I don't know, studio, or not necessarily a domestic house. But some architects might think that this is a good thing. For example, Jean Nouvel said that bring the office into the home and the home into the office. Well, maybe that's what Mies tried to do here. I don't know. Or it was a reaction to the building in the back. Now this is a project for a country house. It's a nice project, and it's bad it was not built, but it's already Mies. It's Mies. He's freeing the plan. He still uses brick and a form of tectonics that relate to his past work, but he's moving towards that Mies that we know. And soon will arrive at his work in Chicago. Now this famous Tugendhat villa in Bruno, which is a fine work, and it's a modern work, you know, through and through. It must have been beautiful to be connected with the Bauhaus. I mean, really, it doesn't matter how you position yourself. It was an exceptional school, and it was that climate of creativity, and they enhanced each other and encouraged each other. I think it was magnificent. I wonder why schools very rarely are like this. Okay. So this is the building. Of course, there are books written by this about this building. I'm rushing a little bit because I still have a lot to say about Mies, and I still want to arrive before the evening arrives here to Harry Weese. He was a builder, obviously, a craftsman. He knew what he was doing. He was rigorous, being German helped. And yes, now the Barcelona pavilion that we all know, it was rebuilt. So what we see today is actually a building that was built afterwards. But I like to think that it was built correctly, although sometimes correctly is not sufficient, or correctedness. But you see, even if he was, somebody told me actually, an art historian from Chicago, John Neff, who was the director of the art program at the First National Bank in Chicago, he told me that this famous saying of Mies, less is more. Now, maybe he was joking, but no, he looked like he was serious when he told me this. He said, then he said less is more because he didn't know too much English. I don't know if it's true. His aesthetics also have to do with less is more, but when you look at this building, you see that there are the ornaments of the wall on the left side, which are natural, of course, natural ornaments, but still ornaments. So he was not as much rejecting, forms of ornamentation. In fact, this is highly ornamental or decorative, this wall. And even here, as you can see. And you can see clearly, and just like Adolf Loos did write the essay Crime and Ornament, but the truth of the matter is he also used marbles that had built-in, if I can say so, ornamentation. So they were not actually purists, although some works, very refined works by Mies, you'd say they are almost purists. But the fact that he's, I mean, there is a certain sensuality even in this building. You know, this love of these, the ornaments of the stone show a certain level of sensuality. So he was not dry. And he couldn't really be, although he maybe tried. Yeah. This was an expensive pavilion. Of course, nobody can, not too many people would afford such a wall in their house. Now, he crossed the ocean, and as opposed to Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer, who went to New York, well, to Boston, he went to Chicago. Together, I imagine, with Moho Linogi, who started the new Bauhaus in Chicago. Unfortunately, Moho Linogi died. He wasn't too old, 50 something, but Mies had a flourishing activity in Chicago. And now you cannot separate Chicago from Mies and Mies from Chicago. This is the famous house, the Farnsworth House. Truly a poetical statement of the highest order in terms of, the Cartesian architecture. It is a poem. It is an architectural poem. Unfortunately, the water, the floods sometimes challenge it, but as you can see, fortunately, is also elevated from the earth, but still floods are unforgiving. Now, the pure functionalist, of course, would have commented, well, what's happening here underneath the building? Yes, it's true. What is happening there? But what is happening for the metaphysical side of life, if I can say so, is that the building is floating in a way. You know, it's discreetly touching the earth. To my shame, I didn't see it. I mean, I saw it in books and magazines and online, but I wasn't there, and I regret now, of course. Yeah, a very fine building, one of his best and very famous, of course. It's almost like you could almost say that even Villa Savoie, to an extent, are they really machines for living? Maybe they are more machines for dreaming or machines for thinking, because they are so pure and abstract. And yes, they are poetical, but I don't know. I don't know if myself I would be very at ease there, at the kitchen, or I don't know, not to disturb the perfection of its architectural crystallization. Very nice, and this picture is also very nice because you have nature in a certain way, and then the building, the work of man. Yeah, a good building, no doubt. These people, I see they are keeping the social distancing, although there was no pandemic then. The furniture is also done by him. He was also a very good designer. Imagine she's the owner of the house. Okay, so Mies at his best. Now, the man of the water, yes, because the flood is the flood. What a change for these architects to meet these enlightened clients, who invested in their dreams. And really, look at these working drawings. They are magnificent. They are like artworks, so refined, so poetical, and yet they are working drawings done manually. But you can tell that he was a poet, he was an architect who was a poet, and he drew like one. Now, Crown Hall at the Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, I have to say that I visited once this place, and when I left it, I was like 20, 30 meters away from it, and I turned my head, and I saw the sunlight. It was sunset. It was touching the entrance platform, and we'll arrive at pictures with it. And I really had a feeling. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera with me, and I regret very much. I regret it then, and I regret now to take a picture, because it was almost like an altar. I mean, I'm talking about this intermediate platform here. I don't know why I felt this, but I had a feeling it was like an altar. The sunlight was striking from the left, was touching it, and it was something magical. I can't explain it rationally. Really, a very, very fine building. I mean, it's perfect. It's almost surreally perfect. Yeah. Okay, so we move forward. So this is the Illinois Institute of Technology, and I think the dean for many years was Dana Goodman there, whom I knew once in New York. Anyway, moving forward, because again we have to arrive at Harry Weese. But looking at these pictures, I understand why Mies is considered one of the great masters. Maybe he became although a little bit dogmatic. He wanted everybody to strive for this kind of perfection. And I don't know, maybe there were limits in his educational system in this sense, maybe. Now, the IIT Chapel that I mentioned already, itself a fine building. And it's incredible how he arrived at the variety using really limited vocabulary, if I can say so. Now this is by Rem Koolhaas. That it's a subway station, and the building is his too. Student center that you see underneath. The Chicago Federal Building, he built a lot. I mean, was very lucky in a way. Chicago embraced him and received him very well. So, if he remained in Europe, he would not have had a chance to build such buildings. Alexander Calder, the sculptor in front of the building. The Lakeshore Drive apartments, also famous blocks of flats by him. pure prisms, very elegant. Here he is in his later years. Doesn't seem to be very happy, but you know, maybe he was not feeling well. Lakeshore Drive. The Seagram building in New York, which was signed, the project was signed by Philip Johnson because he didn't have the right to sign when he arrived in New York then. This is also a very fine building by him. Once I did myself a project for a chapel, a meditation chapel in the plaza, little plaza in front of the, I lost that, I don't have a photograph of that project. I sent it to Japan, but I proposed a little meditation chapel in front of this building, meaning right here. Anyway, okay, Mies. Now we go somewhere else. Even here, you see there are these fine materials that you can only enjoy looking at. Great plans, great elevation, great everything. You know, the integrity of the building is shown also in the drawings. The Berlin National Gallery of Art, which is still, I imagine, I think is still in some kind of reconstruction phase or refurbishment. It has been closed for a few years. But another great building by him. Yes, very fine. He tried to reduce to a minimum the presence of the structure, and he did it, you know, convincingly in this building, and not just in this building. So this is in Berlin, not in Chicago. And some design, furniture design, and then we'll begin talking about Harry Weese. And again, I should be more silent in a way because we have here someone who knows much more than about Harry Weese, and it's a great change, and I'm very grateful. So furniture designed by Mies. Elegant, of course, and expensive, of course. You know, what do? Even the chairs done of, you know, poor materials by Frank Gehry, they cost a fortune because they are signature pieces. At least here the materials are also, you know, kind of expensive. Is that RAM on the right? I imagine so. Because I don't see very well. My eyeglasses are not the best for my eyes at this point, and I didn't change them yet. You see on the walls, he's in the apartment, his apartment in Chicago, and on the walls, now the picture is small, but there are small artworks by his friend Paul Klee, a great painter. Here he is with Philip Johnson on the left, and I think on the right is Phyllis Lombard, a brilliant woman who runs, I think she's still alive, the Center for Architecture in Canada. Yes. Okay, so the Barcelona couch with black straps. I'm not going to read this. Okay, so I ended my presentation of Mies van der Rohe, and now I will start with presentation on Harry Weese. And I repeat what I already said. I'm not an expert in Harry Weese. And all my presentations are mainly about trying to evoke and initiate and promote inspiration more than information, because information can be found easily now on the net, books and so on. This is an architect I respect a lot, and after I prepared this PowerPoint presentation, my respect grew. Because, and I'm not surprised that someone from Oak Park in Chicago said that he was a genius. The word genius is problematic, of course, because, you know, sometimes we use this word superficially. But he was an exceptional man who loved architecture very, very much, and it is shown in his work. And you can tell he was a serious man and a sensitive man, and he took his role seriously. And maybe our guest today would confirm or could say other things that we would welcome. Unfortunately, this house that is seen in the back, somehow I was unable to find pictures of it, and I regret now. I should have searched for more. Now you see the two of them, the two architects that we talk about today. On the right, Mies; on the left, Harry Weese. And here he is in his older age. A very interesting architect. Now, house, the Robert and Susan Drucker house, you know, a modernist language, but you can tell that here was already an architect with skill and who was not dogmatic. And so there is a spirit of freedom even here, although the architectural language is, you know, is functionalist and you know, kind of an orthodox modernism. But you see, if you look at the pictures, you see interesting things, you know, certain details that show that he was a complex man, and he was not just, you know, honoring superficially a dogma. I like this house. And you see the frames of the doors, windows, they are simple, but they are so unique somehow in this case, of course, because there are two floors, two levels there. A good architect, even when, let's say, the project or the commission is not accommodating a lot, still the talent and the sensitive of the architect comes through most of the time. So this is a house, if you build this house today, it will not be out of time or out of place. No, I think it resisted time. And I just read when in 2014 he received a prize for the metro system in Washington. This was 25 years after he built it. It's because that work was still relevant and of great value. Now he also built this embassy in Ghana, in Accra. Obviously, he was recognized. You know, if he received, you know, a commission from the government to build an embassy, he obviously was a recognized architect. This is also interesting, this building. It doesn't seem to, you could compare it a little bit with, although it is different, with the art gallery in Berlin, the National Art Gallery by Mies, somehow, especially at the top part of the building, but has this courtyard, which is the stair. The stair reminds me of the one built by Eero Saarinen in Minneapolis, just near the Museum of Calatrava. And I consider that building by Saarinen superior to the one done by Calatrava, except that that staircase of Jerusalem in Minneapolis is enclosed. Here it is open, but it's still an interesting building. And look at this very fine architecture, you know. So even with a language that seems to be so-called rational, there is a sensitivity here, and the poetry of architecture comes through. And look at the plan. It is a fine plan. It is less puristic than the works of Mies in a way, but still pure and still coherent. Now, the Arena stage in Washington, D.C., this is a building, I don't know, I was a little bit confused. I didn't see that part, you know, on the top part of the plan. I only saw pictures and models, but maybe I didn't study carefully enough. It's you know, it's a public building, and you know, it functions. It's a building that this is in a way a machine, not our habité, but a machine for you know, the spectacle, for the theater, for whatever takes place here. The Times Life building in Chicago. This is a fine tower. I like it. It's convincing. It's different than Mies, but it has presence. It has the proportions are fine, and also he's more in a way risking than Mies. He's using materials that are you know, could be considered perhaps a little bit adventurous. I think it's a fine building, and it would be interesting actually to dedicate some time to compare the tall buildings done by Harry Weese and those done by Mies. You'll see other tall buildings by him that are distinctly different than the ones built in the so-called international style, or in the way Mies built. A good building. Now a church, and I like this building very much. He built, I think, 3 churches. This one, it attracted my attention even before I knew it was by him. I think I don't know. I could maybe I say something unwarranted, because I don't know enough about Harry Weese, and I welcome you know, a statement that contradicts what I say. But I have a feeling he was, although I read on Wikipedia that when he was, I guess, interviewed about his religion or his spirituality, he mentioned that his father was, I don't know how to even pronounce that word. There is a denomination, episcop, something like this, and then his mother was belonged to another denomination, a religious denomination. And when he came to himself, he said, "And I am an architect." But I think he avoided. He maybe because of discretion, the seriousness with which he approached the subject of a church. I mean, this program shows to me that he probably had a religious nature. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think all great artists or great architects or great writers or great musicians, even those who claim that they are atheists, I don't think they can ignore you know, the spiritual life. And they choose to do to honor it in their own ways, but I don't think they are indifferent. It's known that Le Corbusier was almost an atheist, and Frank Lloyd Wright, when he was asked, what about God? Do you believe in God? And he said, I do, but I spell it nature. So look, this is almost a real building, or could say two buildings, but connected. It's so pure, prismatic, and metaphysical. This is metaphysical architecture. Now, of course, the photograph also is a little bit metaphysical, so to speak. But no, look at the building. It's the purity of the triangle, and even when you have, I mean, the diagonals are in tension with the orthogonal parts of the building. It's almost a refined geometrical expressionism here, and you'll see another church by him, the last one that I will show, where the expressionism is almost European, and this only shows that this was an architect who was American through and through, but he assimilated or the forms of consciousness or forms of spirituality even that were not necessarily specific to the United States. The interior is also excellent. It's pure, it's strong, it's vigorous. Yet he uses wood, so it's both warm and arresting through its geometry. So the life of the spirit is honored through the geometry that he chose to use. And is also not afraid to use different materials, like you have bricks here and wood, and then the light. It's a very fine building. And look at this, it's almost organ music. It's almost Bach speaking in terms of architecture. I admire this work. It can also be mysterious because of the lighting. It's discreet yet powerful. Even that detail, it shows clearly a very intense architect who is he's not playing with the forms. There is a certain symbolism at work here, and as such, he was an architect of the highest order, I think. His drawings, I usually start my presentations with the drawings of the architect, but this one I was rushing to finish it, and I didn't investigate his drawings too much, unfortunately. I imagine this is by him. Now look at this detail here. It's intriguing, so to speak. It's you can speculate here almost in philosophical terms. How the roofing breaks the circularity of the brick wall. I love this picture. I really do. I mean, it's I don't know. It has majesty. This is there is majesty here, almost like in a Gothic cathedral. It's tectonically convincing. The light is bringing in mystery, but also rhythm. And then you have the softness of the wood and the roughness in a way of the brick. I like it very much. I mean, also the picture was taken well, I think it was. And then you see the aspiration in a way, that triangle of light, which is suggesting the longing for the above, for God, if you want, and done in an abstract way, as it should be done in architecture. It's a good building. And I like the drawing too. Is so, almost without self-consciousness. I would be curious to see other drawings by him. Now, another church by him, very different than this one. This is in Chicago. This is an urban church, so to speak, and is surrounded by modern buildings, mostly modern, and it is a more rhetorical building, but it is in the center of a city. And what city? No, we are talking about Chicago. So, you know, when there are articles about his work, the word unusual sometimes is used. It is used also in relation with the third church that I will show towards the end, which is a very, very good building itself, I think. So he was taking risks. And I truly believe, this is my belief, that if man was made, you know, in resemblance, you know, or yeah, in some kind of a resemblance to God, the best way to show faith or to show reverence for the divine is to be creative yourself. And if you are not creative, even if you make a church, you are in a certain way, and forgive me for the roughness of my words, in a way you are betraying God. Because to honor the divine, you have to try to be creative too. And if you are not creative, you better, you know, abstain, if I'm allowed to be malicious a little bit. Well, he was creative, and that's the best way, I think, to honor the unknown, the mystery of what we call God. So in a way, when he said, you know, I mean, what was his denomination? What religious denomination he belonged to? When he said, I'm an architect, he didn't say I'm a Catholic or an Orthodox or whatever. He said, I'm an architect. But by saying so, I think he inferred that it is through architecture that he found legitimacy in his quest for the unknown, or in, you know, in his quest for spirituality. It is through architecture. And in a way, I think he meant that it is architecture's responsibility to do so. So it's a very, it seems an humble statement, but it's also very a proud statement and full of responsibility. A responsibility he took upon himself. And I read that his wife, in an interview, declared that he was obsessed by architecture. But I think all great architects are obsessed by architecture. Maybe the word obsessed is a little bit problematic, but when you have love, like for example, I read that Mozart, the great composer, he said, genius is not the one who is not about intelligence, is not about, what else did he say, talent or drive, it's about love, love, love. This was the definition of Mozart of the word genius, that apparently the engine, the motor, the heart of the one we call, you know, in the absence of a better word, genius, is actually connected with love. If you have love and love and love again, it almost doesn't matter if you don't have a lot of talent or even a lot of so-called intelligence, because that overabundance of love compensates for the abscesses in some other parts of your mental or, you know, psychic reality. And I'm thinking of Vincent van Gogh, the great painter, who first failed as a priest. I mean, he didn't fail, but he had so much passion that he scared the church, so he was dismissed. He tried to be an art dealer and he failed there too. So when he started to draw the great painter that he became, he was very unskillful, really. He didn't have what we call talent, but it was because of love, 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 as Mozart would say, because of an immense amount of passion and intensity and total devotion, that he became skillful. And I believe it's true. If you have a lot of passion, I mean, even Frank Lloyd Wright said it plainly. He said, talent is good, practice is better, passion is best. Because if you have talent and you practice a lot, but you have no passion, the result cannot be truly great. But if you have passion, the talent could follow, and so would probably the hard work, because, you know, what would you do with passion without hard work? It's almost a contradiction in terms. So this is, I think, a good building too, differently good. But I wouldn't call this building colder or than, for example, the Unity Temple by Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a different building. It's a larger building. It's in a different context. But I think it's a good building. Okay, down the Performing Arts Center in Milwaukee. He built a lot in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, I don't know if I have great pictures here. Well, I have one here that is, you know, larger. He had some big commissions, and you know, I didn't see too many. I would have liked to see more private houses. I imagine he built some, but I only found the one that I showed at the beginning, and I'll show one at the end that is, you know, very spectacular. But I would have liked to see more domestic architecture from him. There was also, I think, maybe I'm wrong, and I ask for forgiveness if I'm wrong, but I see here also some kind of classicism almost. I think he was taking risks. You will see some buildings that are very adventurous, but I also think his sensibility had some connection, perhaps, with some kind of classicist modernism, if I can call it so. Now, another building in Milwaukee, an excellent prism, you know, austere but convincing. You know, it's a good building. You know what is strange? I mean, okay, maybe when I arrived the metro system in Washington, I arrived, I was going to, you know, somewhere, and then by accident, I arrived in one of these subway stations, and I didn't know it was designed by Harry Weese. But when I was there, I said, this was done by an architect. I mean, I felt the power of architecture, and later on, I discovered that it was done by Harry Weese, and we'll arrive at that excellent work by Harry Weese. Now, the Humanities Building, this one I think was under danger to be demolished, and I hope it was not demolished. Also a very large building. Sometimes he's associated with brutalism, but I think the word brutalist or brutalism are used sometimes, you know, with some license, because, you know, just vigorous buildings do not mean necessarily that they are brutalists. I mean, you can see here traces of sensibility that are, you know, difficult to associate with what brutalism should mean. There is a certain symmetry here, no? I mean, but in that sense, I think that there is a classical side to an extent to his architecture. Inside, though, you see it's a modern interior where the diagonal of the stair brings in something more dynamic. A good building again. Now in Wisconsin, Museum of Art, don't know if I have very good pictures. I have one or two pictures. So he worked with horizontals and with verticals. We saw some towers and we'll see some more, but he was also very capable of working with horizontal buildings convincingly. You would say that he was a more so-called impure architect than Mies, but this is not necessarily a deficiency, because I think there is a certain level of hybridity in his architecture that brings in some richness. You know, when the architectural you know, achievement is too pristine and too pure and too abstract and too intellectual and too poetical, you are at risk of not being able to breathe there. But in a building that handles the contradictions of life with honesty, with skill also, but without imposing, you know, an excessive aestheticism. I don't know. From a certain point of view, I prefer buildings that are more so-called impure. The Latin school in Chicago, also done by him. You see, this is a building that somehow connects, somehow, it's a larger building, of course, it's a public building, but somehow connects with the early works of Mies in Germany, you know, and not with the Mies that we saw in Chicago. It's a good public building, it's a large building, but it has its aesthetics welcome some hybridity, as I put it. Unfortunately, I only have this picture with it. Okay, now the Pierce Tower, an undergraduate residence hall at the University of Chicago, very different from the previous building. Even here, I don't think I have enough pictures, but we can still see it. You see bow windows, which existed also in other buildings of Chicago, historically relevant. Okay, and now a bank, the Mercantile Bank in Kansas City in Missouri. Very, very audacious, you know, first floor here. You know, structurally the building is almost an OSZN, no, an US, I forgot the three letters, unidentified flying object, almost. But besides this, there is also the very refined work here. You see how he did the windows. This shows a refined spirit. It shows what Boileau called l'esprit de finesse, the fine spirit. You know, you have l'esprit de géométrie, the spirit of geometry, which brings clarity and vigor to the building, but you also have subtlety, l'esprit de finesse. And it only shows you he was a complex architect. I mean, who would expect these details and having the first floor or the bottom floors of the building, you know, done in, you know, I mean, this is one building, but there are levels of complexity here that are remarkable for a building that is, you would say, a so-called common office tower. It's not so common. Then a hotel in Kansas City, a little different and maybe a little bit strange, but interesting too. Also, this corner, the way you see, he's not afraid to take risks. He's not afraid to create unexpected, you know, configurations here, architectural configurations, if I can call them so. Interesting. And usually in almost any building, the corner is there where you emphasize the, you know, the meeting of the two sides, and it's usually more different, it's more emphatic, almost rhetorical. This is what he does too, but in a unique way, his way. Inside also there are pleasures to be discovered. Big building also. Well, this is the United States. If you would have lived in Europe, you would not have had easily the chance to build so much and buildings of these dimensions. Now this is a Fulton House converted 19th century 16-story cold storage warehouse building to condominium building. So this was a conversion. You know, interesting this one too, and you would not expect from Harry Weese that we saw before and the Harry Weese that we will see from now on this building. So it shows to me that he was very versatile. I saw, and I probably have here some images where someone who published a book about his works, and he said Harry Weese, tradition and humanism. You know, he was a modernist, but the fact that such words are brought into connection with him only shows his complexity. Now you see the building on the right side at a much lower level, that with a sloping plane or surface. That's also by him, and we arrive at that project, a very nice housing project. And you wouldn't say that this is the man who did these two buildings, which are in close proximity. Okay, now another tower. He was not an, he was, I don't think he can be described as an international style architect. No, he was not. Now, I was talking 2 minutes ago about this project, which I like very much, the River Cottages on Canal Street in Chicago, sloped, structurally expressive facade, responds to the angle and cross bracing of the railroad bridge directly across the river. Yeah, you see an adventurous project, and it impresses me that the same man who did the tower that we saw before, he also did this housing complex. I mean, this could have been done also easily in Rotterdam or, in Europe somewhere, but it is in Chicago, and it is very convincing, I think. Although he took risks, obviously. I like this work. And I think he was very skillful in manipulating the triangle, in working with the triangle. We saw the triangles in that church, the first project, that first church that I showed. Here we see the triangle in a different context. And the triangle does have this power that because of the diagonals, it brings in dynamism. So the composition becomes alert, because the diagonal is the one, the rebel, so to speak, especially in an orthogonal context, like the diagonal in Barcelona. You know, it is the rebellion of the diagonal that creates, tension and thus life. Excellent work. And there is playfulness as well, as you can see. There is geometry, but it's not a morose geometry. It is a playful geometry, yet structurally rigorous. And you know, I also, I mean, this project moves me because somehow it is able to honor the water, you know, in an almost, there is an affection here of architecture, of the building towards the water. And, you know, it becomes, there is a level of intimacy here, you know, because of the scale. You know, it's it's very sensitive, really. It's a modern building, clearly, through and through, but you can tell that he was sensitive to the water. And you know, the trees, the water, the building is modern, but it's not cold, although, you know, the materials are, you know, concrete and metal, but and glass. but but he fragmented the facade and made it, you know, playful. And so I see some kind of cooperation between the building and the water and the trees, and then the bridge, which is not far away. An excellent work. It has an industrial side, it has a domestic side, it has the triangle, which has through its dynamic diagonals, you know, bringing in vivaciousness. I like it very much. And even inside, it's interesting. You know, it has variety. It has. I would like to live in such a building. You know, when I arrive home, I encounter this variety of spaces. The light also brings in, you know, interesting shapes of light and shadow. It's nice. Unfortunately, this Alami stock photo displays everywhere its name. They bother me. But I understand they want to be the proud owners of the photograph. Okay, they are. But they ruin the picture. Now it's this is actually a very good building by him. You know, it's a prison actually, but you know, it's architecture. And I read federal temporary holding prison, which has no window bars. Instead, each cell is provided with a vertical 5-inch slot window. Weese was mandated to follow then new federal prison architectural guidelines, like cells having no bars, and by original design, each prisoner had his own room. Now, it's really a very good building, and it's not easy to do a prison that is a very good building. And it is, you know, in the city, so it has to communicate something else than, you know, just prison. But it's actually a sculptural prism that is very sensitive. You know, the fact that he had to work with these 5 inches wide windows, you know, it was not easy, but he played with these windows almost musically. You know, they are almost musical notations. You wouldn't even think, you know, this is a prison. I mean, if you compare this building with the building on the left or on the right, or okay, on the right is a parking structure, but with others, you can see clearly here was an architect, and on the other sides, maybe a little bit less. Very interesting, very good building, you know, with a difficult program. I don't know if you know, but Frank Gehry proposed at SciArc kind of recently, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago, this theme for the students, a prison or prisons. And it's a difficult program, you know, how I mean, are you supposed to do it oppressively, to make an oppressive building, to punish the lookers, I mean, those who look at the building and those who live in the building? Or are you to be a humanist, to have some compassion? You know, I think he did an excellent job. He did a sensitive work with a difficult program. And I mean, even look at these pictures. You know, you have the inmates there, you know, in orange suits. Very interesting work, really. I don't know of many architects who did, you know, important architects who built prisons. I mean, yes, we have the engravings of Piranesi, but he was really depicting psychological prisons, so to speak, expressed architecturally, yes. Interesting work. And look at the plan, you know, I almost feel like saying I wouldn't mind living there either, you know, maybe even in that cell, you know, it's I mean, I wonder if the people who were housed here were aware. I mean, I wonder if actually architecture made them feel a little bit better, maybe feel a little, you know, feel human after all. Yes, they made mistakes, but they were and are human. So, you know, maybe architecture can help. You know, you build a prison in such a way that you do not punish them additionally, but you can alleviate a little bit their lives, so to speak. Interesting building. And it's interesting, doesn't matter you see it from the terrace of this building or from another point of view. It's almost as if you look at the facade, you say, well, because of the musicality of the musical notations of the facade, it is as almost, I imagine, of course, and maybe I say something unwarranted, but maybe Harry Weese had some compassion for these people, and, you know, gave them at least the expression of you know, the facade of the building has a certain percentage of playfulness, meaning of freedom. You know, although that freedom was of an aesthetical order, but I still think meant something. Now, a building in Middletown, Ohio. For this one, I only found this picture. Maybe if I search harder, I would have found more. I don't know. Then the Oak Park Village Hall, which is very interesting. And in relation with this, I read that someone said that Harry Weese was a genius. I don't know, but it has some very interesting aspects, this building. I mean, look at this. You know, it's. I think it's remarkable. You know, you would say, well, why is nothing so special? Well, I think it is, and you'll see other views where they those pictures made me think of Louis Kahn a little bit. And again, as opposed to Mies, he's not afraid to use, you know, maybe adventurous geometries and even so-called adventurous materials. I think he's closer actually to the truth of life in a way, you know, because life is also impure and unpredictable, and, you know, his architectural statements are not so pure as those of Mies, but you can breathe here, you can live. You know, look at the plan. You know, it's he's a master of diagonals. You know, there is a certain expression. You see, this was the book published, I guess, in Japan, in Process Architecture, or an article about Harry Weese. I don't know if Process Architecture was not a magazine. 1979, Humanism and Tradition. And when you look at his work, you would be a little bit surprised. You know, how come the word tradition comes in? How come the word humanism comes in? But I can see why. You know, there is a certain sense of measure. even of reticence to an extent, and then there are also the diagonals of astute assertion of creativity and even non-conformism and even rebellion. And like here, you see, if you make abstraction of this part on the lower right corner, it's mostly, I would say, a conventional building, kind of, you know, with rooms, with, you know, these open spaces, with a courtyard, you know, square. But he breaks this very courageously. So the dynamism of this part challenges, you know, and maybe this is what, I don't know actually, because these two words, humanism and tradition, maybe do not do completely justice to his work, because it depends what we mean by humanism. We know what we mean by tradition, but here I see also non-conformity or rebelliousness, and it's shown in the lower right corner. So I do think that a good artwork or a good architectural work has both reverence for the past, let's say tradition, but also brings in something new. And I like to, you know, maybe a little bit adventurously, to remind myself that the linguistic roots or root for the word tradition is the same one as for the word treason. Yes, both treason or trahison in French, both treason and tradition have the same linguistic root. And you would say this is almost impossible, because tradition means, you know, to be respectful towards what preceded you, but maybe tradition, in order to be alive, also need treason. In other words, innovation. And he does that. He's innovative. And look at this, you know, it's almost erotical, no? And I think all great art and all great architecture has some eros in it. It has to be, because it has to be alive. He doesn't do this everywhere, but he does it where it matters and is sufficient. Again, if you remove what is here on the upper left corner, it's a building, you could say, yes, traditional, you know, even with a sloping roof, but his rebelliousness is shown convincingly because of that break into the otherwise, you know, almost the serenity of the composition. Interesting building, and inside is also very convincing. You know, it's coherent, structurally coherent. It has force. It is vigorous, but it is also warm. It is not a cold environment to work in. I like it. This is another part. This reminds a little bit of that church in the 11th, how was it called, in Chicago. So he works also with curves. Now here it is compared the work of Alvar Aalto on the left and the work of Harry Weese on the right. And you could say, yes, there are some similarities here, but there are also differences. Of course, also in terms of scale, but you know, I don't think you know, the parallel is a disturbing one. It's not a pastiche, no. I love this picture and this detail. You see, he doesn't need finishes. He uses the brick, the power of the brick. You almost feel like recalling what Alvar Aalto, Luis Kahn said about the brick, no? maybe he was aware. I mean, not maybe. I'm sure he was aware of the work of Louis Kahn in Ahmedabad. I always have a problem. Islamabad and I'm talking about the Management Institute. I think in Ahmedabad. But he's different. He is more free than Kahn. He's less. Kahn could also could at times be a little bit. I'm saying something now, maybe questionable, but I think Kahn could be sometimes a little bit of a formalist. But Harry Weese here is, you know, playful enough. Yes, he uses the circle, but he play. You know, these worlds are kind of free, so to speak. And look at the ceiling. Interesting picture, and it's, you know, it's not a picture. It's not that it is an interesting picture. It's an interesting building. Okay, and now the library. Unfortunately, for this one, I didn't find pictures, and I asked for forgiveness. And now a building for the University of Buffalo, large building itself. And yeah, I think I have only 2 pictures with this building. Now, there is another one. You see, he works well also with opacity, you know, with opaque walls and big dimensions, you know, something I didn't quite see in Mies. I don't know if Mies could have handled well large, you know, opaque walls. Now, a library in Boston, the University of Massachusetts. I only have this picture for this one. Now, the Given Institute in Aspen, in Colorado, which is, you know, a building for, you know, free thinkers, for those who think about the future. The building is almost like, you know, it doesn't want to overwhelm. It is probably some kind of a machine for thinking, a fortress for the mind, a fortress for the brain, where the thinkers meet in Aspen, Colorado, and reflect on human life and the future. This building, you know, I don't know. I mean, there were other architects in the United States who built, you know, somehow in this way, but it's still a very good building. And this church, which I'm impressed by his 3 churches. This one is remarkable. Just look at it. You know, it says dedication of the new St. Thomas Church. And what you see is what you get. This is the building. This is North American expressionism. I think in North America, expressionism very rarely asserted itself because it's not part of the culture, it's not part of the spirituality. But I think Harry Weese, with this building, shows some connections with Europe. Although the building is built in the United States, but I see here, I mean, if I would have seen this building built in Germany, or especially northern Germany, I would have understood. But it is built in the United States, and it is built by an architect who only shows how complex he was. He did, you know, office buildings, libraries, but his churches are very intriguing. And look also inside, you know, look at that, almost you could say dirty, the concrete wall. I mean, I think he's telling the truth. He's not embellishing anything. He's not trying to seduce through embellishments. He's telling the rough truth of human life. and even of human spirituality. Now, you know, that decor there, of course, is not his, but look at the architecture. And the spire of the church is impressive. It's very simple, no? But because of its height, it is expressionistic. And then also, you know, the curved roof of the part of the building on the left adds to the drama. So it is some kind of, you know, there are distortions in this building that show even maybe a little bit of anxiety, or if I can say so. There is here. If I would have another architect in my mind here, I would think of something in between Hugo Herring and Fritz Höger in Germany. But no, it's Harry Weese in the United States. It's a remarkable church, I think. It is very simple, but it's also complex. I do think, without knowing him, and I apologize if I say something wrong, but I do think he had a spiritual side that maybe was hidden, maybe was not expressed officially. But what I see here is not, I see a man who is not indifferent towards what is called the life of the spirit. No one indifferent to the life of the spirit would build that spire. No. And it's beautiful to contemplate here the power of architecture. So with an elongated pyramid, he actually says a lot. And it moves me, this power of architecture, you know. Because here there is a form of exaltation. That exaltation that Walter Gropius talked about in his manifesto, in his Bauhaus manifesto, which was an expressionist manifesto, and it ends with the last word of that manifesto is faith. And the manifesto, as you know, was illustrated with a cathedral of socialism, drawn by or engraved by Lionel Feininger. And in that short manifesto, Walter Gropius stresses the importance of the artists and architects coming together to build the crystalline, you know, cathedral of the future. Well, here I see that aspiration, and that this aspiration, this longing for the beyond, also belonged to Gropius at that early stage in his life, when he said that the difference between the artist and the craftsman is only one. They are both craftsmen, but the artist is an exalted craftsman. And what I see in this spire in particular is the exaltation of the longing for the unknown. Call it God or call it, doesn't matter what you want to call it. I see a form of exaltation, a form of longing for the infinite, for the absolute. I like this building very much. Okay, and I like it is indoors as well. You know, this wall is in its you know, it's not a white wall, it's not a gray wall. It oscillates. And exactly in this oscillation, I see some kind of equivalent of the, although here not in terms of light, of the chiaroscuro of Rembrandt's paintings. Some kind of oscillation between dark and light, between light and shadow. It's almost, I see it as an expression in a certain way of some doubting perhaps, or even some sorrow. And it is appropriate to invoke the word sorrow when you see that cross there and its shadow as well. And this is also interesting that there are actually two crosses. House of the day. This is spectacular private house, and I think this is the last project I show, the Shadow Cliff house by Harry Weese. There are even more spectacular views of it. It's technologically or technically very well built. You would almost say that it was an engineer who built it, but no, there was an architect. And I imagine being on that armchair and contemplating the sea, and it's very cantilevered. It's really you know, a building that is very ambitious in this sense. You see it here. You know, it's a courageous building, and you will see in the drawings. Let me see back here. Yeah, look at the cliff. I mean, we are talking about here really a building which wants to fly, which wants to leave Earth. You know, almost like you know, yeah, something launched from NASA. It's really, I think it reduced to a strictly minimum the connection with the Earth. It's really incredible. I didn't realize looking at these pictures that the cliff was so formidable, and that the building actually, you know, you almost wonder how come the building is not falling in the abyss below. Even here, even in this project, I see someone with spiritual aspirations, and maybe even with some angst. I didn't know Harry Weese, I'm only imagining, but he seemed to me a complex man who was not unaware of maybe even the dark side of life. Because if you could somehow make abstraction of the plan and just look at the section, my God, this is a building really taking off. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Again, I cannot avoid the word exaltation. Somebody told me who worked with Alvar Aalto that Alvar Aalto liked to drink, and he actually drank a lot. That's what I was told. I don't know about Harry Weese. I don't know if he drank or not, but in this project, he didn't have to, because you know, there are certain people who are so-called born drunk. They don't need to drink because they are dreamers. They aspire, they long for a beyond that, you know, other people arrive at, so to speak, just through drinking. But a creator, an artist, an architect, a writer, a musician has the chance, they have the chance to arrive or to long for that beyond through the intoxication, so to speak, of their own work. So they don't necessarily need to drink, although some of them drink, of course. Like Carlos Scarpa, I was told that he was a heavy drinker. I don't know. I only drink personally buttermilk, but maybe that's why I don't do great artworks. Okay, now the subway stations in Washington, D.C., which are remarkable. And Herbert Mushom, the architecture critic of the New York Times, unfortunately he died, had very positive you know, words about this work. He did you know, several subway stations, and you know, almost the whole metro Washington DC system was done by him. But you see how different this is from most subway stations in the world. You know, there is nothing frivolous here, nothing cheap, because you would say, well, it's a subway station. No, this is, if there was no train coming through this building, you could say it could be even a church, a cathedral. Look at it. It's almost as if the trains are moving towards paradise or returning from paradise. It's magnificent, you know. It's structure, it's pure structure, but it's also poetry. It's also, you know, everything is fine, you know, very convincing. I love it. And it was here that I found myself, and I didn't know who the architect was. I was taking the train to Maryland, and I noticed immediately that this is a good, a fine architecture work, and indeed is. And you see, this is the power of architecture, even if you don't know who made it. And Le Corbusier has a statement about this, that a good architecture, a good building, a good architectural work makes you stop. It touches your heart. You immediately, it's almost as if you breathe differently, because you are witnessing an act of creation. The human creativity makes you exalted. Yes, this is another you know, station by him, different than the other one, but equally convincing. They look almost so-called science fiction, but they are on Earth. They are not on Mars, and they are remarkable. How banal most subway stations in the world are compared to this. And this was done, you know, almost 50 years ago. This is the power of architecture. Charles Baudelaire was right. Architecture, art has two halves. One half speaks about the ephemeral, the transitory, the circumstantial, and the other half speaks about the eternal and the immutable. And because of this other half, a good artwork or a good building does not really age, because it has that part that doesn't age, that is eternal and immutable, because it murmurs an eternal truth in a way, which has to do with beauty, of course. I mean, if you do such a building today, such a structure today, such a subway station today, you'd be congratulated, because this is ageless, really. It's you know, it belongs to now, it belonged to 50 years ago, and it will belong to 50 years from now, and even 500 years from now, if it was to last for so long. Excellent work. Bravo, Harry Weese. And you see the human drama, you know, you see the human beings. They didn't have to, at that time, to use social distancing. They didn't wear masks. But you see architecture enveloping them in a, there is a certain level of authority here, but it's not an oppressive one. It is more a sense of order. But it is not a restrictive order, it's not a rigid order. I would love to have such subway stations in many parts of the world, done in the same spirit, not necessarily, you know, ad litera. It really gives you a sense of hope. It gives you a sense, it's almost like, you know, a palace of justice. You see, this is the power of architecture, whatever Peter Zumthor might say. It does have the ability, architecture, to change lives and life and contribute to its betterment. And this building, in a way, with simple means, although it is a great engineering work as well, it makes you believe that things are or could be fine in this world, that there is some justice in this world because there is beauty in this world. Still standing strong after its opening in 1976, the Washington D.C. Metro rail system, designed by architect Harry Weese, was deemed the recipient of the AIA's 25-year award. So 25 years, this was the 25th award of AIA, and it was done in 2000. It was offered in, I don't know, 2000 something. So you know, more than 30 years after it was built or opened. And you see, this is not a place to display frivolous posters and so on. This is the place of architecture, and this is the power of architecture. It doesn't need, facile images and commercialism and so on. No, the structure, the power of architecture is enough, and we should remember this more often. And look at this picture, it is a clear geometry, and yet it is a little bit mysterious. We almost feel like a certain spiral is implied in the physicality of the structure. And this is the last picture of my presentation. It's just a subway platform, no, a train platform. Okay, nothing special. But I see here two wings. I see here the same exaltation I saw in that house, hanging precariously, ready to fly, to take off. And here I also see, you see, with the simplest means, we are talking about, a metro station, above the ground. And, you could say, well, what could be more, banal in a way, but it's not banal at all. I truly see here two wings. I see here a man who wants to fly, and he flies respecting gravity, but at the same time, his spirit is flying. And I salute Harry Weese. I wish him happy birthday. And I really think we can learn a lot from him if we study him further, because, I only try to incite you with kind of rapid trip through his work, a lifetime's work. So I thank you very much, and maybe someone who knows more than me and wiser than me will tell us something about Harry Weese and so on. Thank you very much.
Are you still on, Dan?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Are you recording these?
I recorded, yes. Do you want me to stop the recording?
No. I'm just wondering if I want to get a hold of that recording later on, can I do that?
Sure, I will gladly send it to you. Yes. Thank you.
Right. I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. You are generous. Thank you. He left. And in a way, this says a lot in a good sense. He was, I think, emotional. So this gentleman, an architect, he worked with Harry Weese for 17 years. And I only regret he didn't tell us something, but maybe through his departure, he said a lot, in the sense that he was emotional. I think emotion overwhelmed him, and I respect his living.